What is poppin' YouTube? Back again with another video. We're talking about some must-stash beat the breakout type players we've seen in recent weeks. Puka, Devon, Michael Wilson Jr. These type of guys that if you can get them before all your league mates are trying to get them, the value, peace of mind, and advantage that you have on a week-to-week basis is so dire. So today we're going to be talking through a multitude of must-stash options for you at a multitude of different positions. So hit that like button, hit that subscribe button if you haven't already, on the way to 1,000 subs, and let's go. So officially, before we get in, we're going to be talking about some players, but these three players, you need to make sure that they're already rostered. They should already be rostered because we've talked about them in previous weeks, but Quentin Johnson should be on a roster, especially with Mike Williams being out. First round wide receiver for the Chargers should be on a roster. Tyjae Spears, he's been pretty much equivalent to Derrick Henry on a snap count basis. So Tyjae Spears, if anything were to happen to Derrick Henry, they're using Tyjae Spears more than any other backup running back in Derrick Henry's tenure. So go get Tyjae Spears. And my third running back is going to be Kendre Miller. We talked about him in our first mustache video 2 weeks ago. Didn't really have a great game when he was the starter. But right now, Jamal Williams is still on IR. Alvin Kamara is back, but I would be still stashing Kendre Miller if he isn't already taken. But let's move on to some guys that you need to be stashing. My first player you need to be stashing this week is Rashee Rice for the Kansas City Chiefs. Currently, right now, he's available in 89% of ESPN leagues and 50% of sleeper leagues. We look at what he's done over these last few weeks: 11 fantasy points in week 1, 4 fantasy points in week 2, 10 fantasy points in week 3, and then 6 fantasy points in week 4. So he hasn't been an every week starter for you. It's been pretty mid. It's been pretty mid for Rashee Rice. But we also have to understand, even though you might be the wide receiver 1 for the Kansas City Chiefs, does not necessarily make you the wide receiver 1 because you got Travis Kelce. But with Rashee Rice, we know that someone else besides Travis Kelce is going to have to take some targets. And Rashee Rice, he's had some drops early on. As we continue and progress, he does look like the best wide receiver. He looks better than Sky Moore. He looks better than Kadarius Toney. So I think Rashee Rice, as the season goes on, he's going to be asked to do a bigger and bigger role. And the fact that Rashee Rice, as a rookie, is being asked to do all that he's already doing. I mean, think of last season. Think of the snap share with Sky Moore. We were begging for that second round Sky Moore wide receiver to get on the field. This year with Rashee Rice, he's already on the field. So I think Rashee Rice is definitely someone that I would be targeting as a mustache candidate in my league. My next mustache is going to be Wan'Dale Robinson. And there's a chance, I've seen some start-sit questions with Wan'Dale, so there's a chance that he is already on your squad. But it's kind of crazy that Wan'Dale is actually less owned than Rashee Rice. Wan'Dale is available in 98% of ESPN leagues and 87% of sleeper leagues. And really right now, only 9 receptions, 61 yards, 0 touchdowns, a wide receiver 96 on the season. But we saw this in week 4, as much as the Seattle Seahawks were absolutely pummeling, laying it down on the Giants, that he still had 9 fantasy points in a PPR league, 6 targets, 5 receptions for 40 yards. Wan'Dale Robinson looks like the most explosive wide receiver. We said he was the most explosive wide receiver as a rookie, but of course, when you have an injury, when things occur to you, and you have to bounce back, and then they added a bajillion slot wide receivers, it was hard for us to really project Wan'Dale Robinson this season. But I say going forward, someone needs to step up as a receiver for the Giants because Darren Waller has been absolute trash, and then there's been nobody else. Isaiah Hodgins hasn't been his prototypical waiver wire self of last season. Wan'Dale Robinson seems like the most explosive, seems like the guy. We thought Paris Campbell might have that potential, but Wan'Dale Robinson, he's our number 2 mustache player for this week. I think there's a ton of potential with our man Wan'Dale. So go see if Wan'Dale is on waivers. If Rashee Rice is in there, I would definitely go look to add Wan'Dale Robinson. Our next mustache, and we talked about him in another video a few weeks back, of Luke Musgrave. I feel like is a mustache tight end. The tight end landscape is atrocious. We just talked about Darren Waller. Every week we have Darren Waller as like tight end 5 because there's no other tight ends from like tight end 5 to tight end 12. It's pretty much all just a crapshoot. You're just rolling the dice, hoping that they score a touchdown. Maybe they get 4 catches for 40 yards and a tutty because it's just been absolutely atrocious. But Luke Musgrave has looked pretty good and had some pretty good potential week in and week out. If we look at his total season, 8 fantasy points in week 1, 4 fantasy points in week 2, 10 fantasy points in week 3, and then last week, a super down week with only one catch, but he did go out injured in that game. So I feel like whoever might have had Luke Musgrave, if they were owned in your league, definitely dropped him after last week just to pick up someone else. But Luke Musgrave, besides Sam Laporta, he's been the second most impressive rookie tight end this season. 12 receptions, 125 yards, tight end 25. This Packers offense continues to get back with Christian Watson, Romeo Doubs getting a lot of targets. It's going to open things up for Luke Musgrave. And he's been getting targets targeted down the field often, and that's what makes me excited because he's not just getting those 2-3 yard curl routes off the line of scrimmage. They are letting him run because he is a super fast tight end. So if you need some tight end depth and maybe you have a deeper roster, or maybe you're starting tight end like Jake Ferguson each and every week, which could be fine, go add Luke Musgrave as another potential option for you. You can never have too many of these upside tight ends because if Luke Musgrave were to end up breaking out like Sam Laporta, you're going to be happy that he is there on your roster. My next mustache player is going to be Chuba Hubbard. Chuba for the Carolina Panthers. Miles Sanders has just been absolutely beat up here recently. When we look at what Chuba's done, 119 rushing yards, 11 receptions, 57 yards. Miles Sanders is actually only averaging 3.4 yards per attempt, which isn't great. And a lot of that could be based on his injury. A lot of that could be the fact that Bryce Young has been struggling. But Chuba, in his 3 games, he's averaging 4.6 yards per attempt. So he's actually averaging more yards per attempt than Miles Sanders is. So not to say that Chuba, if he were to be getting the full workload, would all of a sudden become this hyper efficient, better running back than Miles Sanders, because I still think Miles Sanders is a more talented running back than Chuba. But Chuba is definitely someone that when we're looking at the running back landscape, any of these guys on a weekly basis can become weekly viable. I think Chuba Hubbard is definitely someone worthy of a stash if you need some running back help. My next running back is going to be Tank Bigsby. We have been a pro Tank Bigsby channel, and we even said a few weeks ago that Tank Bigsby was worthy of a drop just because he was not actually overtaking Travis Etienne. He didn't have the same type of upside and necessarily wasn't having any touchdown upside to make up for his lack of attempts. And if we look at his fantasy points, 5 fantasy points in week 1, 0 fantasy points in week 2, 7 fantasy points in week 3, and then only 1 fantasy point last week. Now, he does have 2 rushing touchdowns. He's the RB61 on the season. So you're probably saying to me, Caleb, I'm probably just going to leave this guy on waivers, and that's totally fine. Like I said, I've given you some more guys that you deep stashes, but if you're a Travis Etienne owner, I might think about adding Tank Bigsby just because I think if he were to get the volume, he would have some high upside plays, and he is a rookie running back, so they like to get them involved pretty much later in the season. We've seen that with Jahmyr Gibbs. We're seeing that with Tank Bigsby. We're seeing that with Zach Charbonnet, that each and every week they start to get a little bit more touches and their snap percentage goes up. Now, the last 3 and 4 weeks hasn't had a high snap percentage for Tank Bigsby, so we'll have to see how that ends up playing out, but I think Tank Bigsby definitely is a great stash option if some of these other players that I mentioned ahead of time are off the board. Our next must stash is our man, 3-legged Greg Dulcich. My man had amazing rookie tight end historical profile based on how he did last season. I mean, when we're looking at his pace last year from week 6 to week 16, we're talking about a guy that was consistently putting up 12, 11, 12, 14, 13 fantasy points, and he was just a monster. And of course, there were all the reports this offseason that Adam Troutman was going to be the starting tight end. Well, we've watched this Denver Broncos offense, and they are missing a pass catcher in the middle of the field that is someone like Greg Dulcich. And so I'm excited for Greg Dulcich because Sean Payton, in his time, has been known to have elite level tight ends like a Greg Dulcich could be. So I traded for Greg Dulcich when he got injured. I traded pretty low. I got him on quite a few rosters as a stash. So I think if you definitely need tight end help, I think a lot of us are forgetting about Greg Dulcich. I think this would be a great target. I like Luke Musgrave just a little bit more, only because he's healthy and because we know his situation. We've seen that upside this season. But if Luke Musgrave isn't there, and like I said, you're maybe in a deeper league and or need some tight end help, 3-legged Greg Dulcich is just another amazing opportunity. And we're going to give you 2 more stashes just off the rip to potentially go target. We're talking Josh Downs for the Indianapolis Colts. Josh Downs and Anthony Richardson were very close during the rookie OTAs, throwing the ball outside of the hotel. Always great to see that chemistry building built up. But last few weeks, 6, 7, 13, 5 fantasy points. So he's putting up fantasy points. He's not putting up elite fantasy points. When I watch Josh Downs, he still seems like the most explosive. Seems like he's passing Isaiah McKenzie on the depth chart, which is exciting for our man Josh Downs. So I think as we talk about the next 4-week little stint, Josh Downs could definitely have some serious fantasy football value. Jonathan Mingo, 2nd round draft pick to the Carolina Panthers. We've seen DJ Chark, we've seen Adam Thielen have their fantasy football weeks, but I still think Jonathan Mingo is the most explosive wide receiver out of the 3, just based on his time at Ole Miss, but he's available in 90% and 75% of sleeper leagues. You're in a deeper league and some of these other stashes are not available, just go look at Jonathan Mingo. I think he's a potentially great one to have. Elijah Mitchell, also a very interesting candidate, as we've seen him be the backup to CMC. We saw in his rookie season him put up a very solid fantasy football points per game. If there were anything were to happen, this is more of if anything were to happen to CMC, but we have seen that happen before. Elijah Mitchell would be a great insurance policy to have at the end of your bench. And so that's pretty much it for my must stash, beat the breakout type players. So let me know if you like any of those stashes down below. Appreciate you guys so much for tuning in. We're on the road to 1,000 subscribers. So if you haven't subscribed already, subscribe. Want you here in the community. Ask me any start sit question down below. Ask me any stash question down below. Happy to help you pursue fantasy football championships. And I'll catch you on the next one. Peace.